To the right of the screen in the central Atlantic, Hurricane Nigel. 80-knot winds, high-end Category 1 storm, moving north at 14 knots. Not really expected to affect anybody. Let's take a look at the climate statistics. The North Atlantic Oscillation, a little bit depressed, but starting to pick up, reflecting increasing zonal flow out in the Atlantic. The PNA, it's a little bit elevated due to the highly amplified pattern, a ridge across British Columbia. The Arctic Oscillation is pretty much neutral, very typical flow around the hemisphere for this time of year, and El Nino continues to trend into moderate to strong territory. And the Mattajulian Oscillation is Phase 3. Now, we're not very strongly locked into Phase 3. In fact, we're probably going to go back to indeterminate. But typical patterns this time of year for Phase 3 would be dry in California, warm in parts of the southern Rockies, cool and dry in the West Gulf Coast region, and warm in the Great Lakes. There's our surface map around midday. How would we characterize this? A big ridge across the eastern U.S. from the Great Lakes on down towards Georgia and Florida. On either side, we have northwesterly flow across the northeastern U.S. and southerly return flow through Texas on up to Oklahoma, Iowa, and Minnesota. The warm air advection and moisture advection coming up from the south, helping to support these areas of storms, one of them associated with this warm front in Minnesota on down towards Iowa. And that's where the storms are. We've also got a dry line from the eastern Dakotas down towards Dodge City, through Estillene, Turkey, Childress, and down towards Lubbock and Hobbs. Behind that, dew points in the 40s, a little bit of westerly component to that wind. But on the other side, southerly flow, and dew points pretty close to 60 to 65. And then up in the northwestern U.S., a new frontal system. You can see that there is some cool air behind that, temperatures in the 40s and 50s in the mountains. And out in Montana, strong downslope flow. They're getting some pretty gusty winds out on the lakes there, and so there is a lake wind advisory around Jordan and Glasgow, and that's on Fort Lake Peck. I don't know if any viewers are going to be out there on that lake, but if you are, now you know the details. Let's head out towards the Pacific. There goes another Gulf of Alaska system moving west to east. A bit of an atmospheric river affecting that part of Alaska, and then up north, some clearing weather and cool conditions. Starting to see a lot of 30s on that map. Typically this time of year in the morning, it should start out around 32 at Fairbanks, 39 at Anchorage. But this morning, Anchorage recorded its first freeze of this winter season, just slightly ahead of schedule. And they also reported an aurora on the METEOR observations. There it is right there. This footage was passed on via Brian Bretschneider, the great Alaskan climatologist. And we do have a G1 geomagnetic storm going on this morning, rated KP5. That's triggering that aurora, which was seen as far south as Glasgow, Montana. And as mentioned, we do have Hurricane Nigel out in the Atlantic, 975 millibars on that, already recurving and undergoing some slow strengthening, which will bring it up to 90 knots. Let me show you that. However, they've backed off on that major hurricane prediction, Category 3, and we're just looking at Category 2 on that storm as it heads to the northeast and ends up just west of Ireland. Later in the week, the Cape Verde area will become active, and it looks like whatever develops there is probably going to follow the old Franklin track, as I call it. Seems like it's a well-worn track just off the east coast, maybe just west of Bermuda. You know, we'll see exactly where it ends up. Still, that's kind of a ways off. But I'll take you right into the AWIPS graphics. This is what the Weather Service forecasters are seeing. We don't use dumbed-down TV graphics here or anything like that. This is real operational graphics. And this is Nigel right here in the center. You're going to see that move north, and then this area is going to come together. The shading is what's important because that's your low-level vorticity. That's just a measure of the spin in the air from shear and curvature. So anywhere where it's really dark, That's going to point to a suspect area. Don't worry about this. This is terrain interaction. And some of that is actually the intertropical convergence zone, but that's not going to develop. What we're looking for is this area here and maybe near the Cape Verde Islands themselves. Oh yeah, this is pretty cool. Look at that cold front. That shows up pretty well. And in mesoscale analysis, I do use the low-level vorticity product to find fronts. You can do that on the SPC meso-analysis site. Anyway, let's see what's happening tropical-wise. Little interaction with the front as Nigel heads north. Then we look out there near the Cape Verde Islands. This is going to be for Wednesday. Going into Thursday, yeah, there's one little tropical wave right there. And we're going to look for more waves coming off the West African coast. That looks like an area right there, some cyclogenesis just southwest of the Cape Verde Islands. We're up to Thursday night. And yeah, look out there around Florida. That's a storm coming together, some sort of tropical disturbance. I just backed that up to Thursday. You can see that developing near the Bahamas, and there it goes north. So now we're up to Friday and Saturday, little storm system off the Carolinas. Meanwhile, this comes together. So we're up to Friday night, and then moving forward, going into Sunday, that's going to be a tropical depression or a tropical storm, maybe even a low-end hurricane, but that's rapidly recurving. And then we focus on this stuff here, a couple waves, and maybe probably nothing further east that I can tell. But a couple of suspect areas right there, that's pretty much exactly where NHT is focusing. But some very strong recurvature, according to the GFS on some of that stuff, probably being blocked by this strong ridge up to the north and probably some strong shear associated with that, because where you have polar highs interacting with tropical air, you're going to get strengthened westerlies, and that's probably doing a number out there in the Atlantic. All right, so here's the AWIPS plot for Texas and Oklahoma, showing clusters of thunderstorms moving eastward along Interstate 35 and then down towards Ardmore, Bowie, and Gainesville. Doesn't look very organized at this time. It's still pretty early in the convective day. I would expect as the afternoon progresses, some of these, especially on the tail end, would become a little bit more severe and a little bit more organized as well. So if we pause this and look at the data, definite southerly flow all down towards Dallas. We've got dew points as high as 65, 63, 64. This is not very sultry moisture, but it's enough to support some thunderstorms. And you can see temperatures down to the south coming up to 92 and a pretty strong temperature dew point spread, 30 degrees. When we see a 30-degree spread, that tells us that we're trending more towards high-based storms, because that indicates an LCL generally above 5,000 to 6,000 feet. And if you go to the Aviation Weather Center and click around on some of these plots, I'm seeing some bases around 3,000 to 4,000 near the rain-cooled air. But as you go away from that area, 6,500, DFW 9,000, Greenville, clear, Mineral Wells, clear, Wichita Falls, 10,000. That's going to be debris on the backside of the storm. And out ahead of it, Hugo, 10,000. Not finding a whole lot of low cloud, and a lot of it's pretty elevated. So that's kind of an indication in itself. And here's how things look on the satellite loop. This definitely has the look of a decaying MCS, mostly comprised of mid and high clouds. Not seeing much low cloud, except which would be directly near the precipitation. Let's take a look a little further to the south, because this is always the area of interest, but not seeing really anything for a low cloud field, maybe a few areas of stratocumulus around Dallas, and that's about it. So the moisture is definitely a little bit lacking, but nevertheless, some elevated anvils spreading to the east-southeast, and what I'm looking for now is possible redevelopment along some of these boundaries, maybe further to the west or southwest. So we'll take a look at the high-resolution rapid refresh. And surprisingly, you can kind of get more information from the temperature product instead of reflectivity, because this is showing outflow pools. Let's animate this over the remainder of the afternoon, and we see just a lot of activity there around the Red River. But there's one speck right there around Paducah. That's going to be around 5 p.m. And yeah, that definitely grows. Kind of lost my place there. So that's going to be 7 p.m., 8 p.m. So some activity around Altus down towards Crowell, Paducah, Knox City, and possibly down around, like I said, it'd be around Sweetwater. And I used to forecast around there. I was stationed at Dias years ago, and I was a forecaster there. So I do know that area pretty well, even chased a bit out in that part of the country. Anyway, looks like a small MCS along the Red River after dark in that corridor around Denton, Gainesville, and then just propagating to the east-southeast, maybe into Dallas, maybe into Greenville after midnight. Now I can look at that on the reflectivity, a little bit more of a familiar product, and you can kind of see the evolution. Little MCS right there along the Red River, tracking east-southeast and then dissipating just before sunset. And of course, a lot of activity there in Oklahoma as well. I didn't cover that quite as much, but yeah, a little bit of redevelopment on the backside there as well. And that's probably also associated with the increase in the low-level jet. But down to the south, maybe just lacking something to keep those storms going. And I never did cover the remainder of the Arctic and Canada. Let's take a look at that. A polar air mass starting to develop and cover much of Baffin Island, Victoria Island, Nunavut, and northern Quebec. Temperatures down into the 30s. Coldest temperature I'm seeing looks like 28 right there. So not super cold, but it is certainly a sign that winter is coming. An included system moving through the prairies. Got that downslope flow on the backside. Plenty of smoke still ravaging Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories. So that's continuing to go. And a few streamers of smoke as well out there along the Atlantic coast. We have an outgoing system in the northeastern U.S. bringing some rain on the backside. That's that deformation zone, the cold conveyor belt right there. And that is not Hurricane Lee or Tropical Storm Lee. That's already long gone way out there in the Atlantic. And that brings us to the ridge, a little portion of that polar high moving south, and we've come full circle. And hopefully that gives you an idea of what's going on around the country. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. I'm going to leave you with some footage from February 14th of 2021. This was the famous crash of the drone, trying to fly it in near freezing conditions with freezing drizzle. That did not go very well. And you're going to see that crash at the end. Landed in somebody's backyard, but I managed to get it back. Anyway, I wanted to let you know I've never done that silly like, comment, and subscribe thing, but today I want to go ahead and ask that favor of you. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I would appreciate that. You don't have to be a Patreon supporter, but if you can do that, that would mean a lot to me. And I'm hoping if we can grow this thing, I can start moving towards more of a daily schedule and maybe add more segments, tutorials, and live streams, especially as we get into severe weather season. Okay, hope you have a great Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.